Tensions between the US and Russia have been a roller coaster since the Soviet War, but now the conflict in Ukraine threatens to aggravate the relationship further. So it is telling that Ukraine and other US allies are pleading for additional Stinger missiles, the technology adept at downing Russian helicopters, to keep the Russian bear at bay. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Due to the thousands of Stinger anti-aircraft systems being transferred to an invaded Ukraine, the House Armed Services Committee is making noise over the need for the US military to develop new technology. No prizes for guessing why the demand to replenish stocks is such a high emergency at the moment. Not just for Ukraine, but all allies of the United States, as the need to replenish stocks in Europe will have a knock-on effect on the safety and security of allied states, especially those in NATO. Two top military leaders, HASC Chairman Adam Smith and HASC Ranking Member Mike Rogers, jointly wrote to the Pentagon to highlight how the events in Europe were a clear sign of the importance of such capability. But since there's the production of supplies for Allied defense, it does seem like the perfect time to bootstrap an upgrade, especially given the Stinger was originally designed in the 1960s. That makes it a young invention in the grand scheme of things, so from that perspective we're still very much in the first generation phase. That's why, despite variations and improvements, a next-gen replacement is long overdue. Desired tech specs for the next round will include low-cost manufacturing, exportability to overseas allies, and a 36 months turnaround. Perhaps a pipe dream, and certainly the wait time will make Ukrainian front lines anxious, but in fact the US had been trying to replace the Stinger for a while. The last official word was in 2020, but since that short time nothing has materialized, which leads some to wonder whether the new demands are pie in the sky or carefully considered after failed revamps. But with President Biden announcing an extra $8 million in military assistance to Ukraine, as well as Congress passing a spending bill containing a whopping $13.6 in aid, it would seem the resources are in play to fast-track this long-anticipated project. It is fitting then that the demands for upgrading the short-range air defense system have parallels with the technology's initial conception. Shoulder-mounted Soviet killer. Historically, the need for frontline soldiers to defend against low-flying attack helicopters stems from Soviet engagement. Soviet attack helicopters would move en masse with devastating effect on layers of defense, so mobile systems that can be deployed by individual soldiers became an immediate strategic requirement. Current Stingers are based on the initial FIM-43 Red-Eye concept from 1962, an infrared homing missile. Yet it wasn't until 1975 that there would be a shoulder launch following extensive revisions into what we commonly know today as a Stinger missile. The development would continue right through until 1987, with 16,000 missiles produced. Deliverables would arrive on the front line in 1989. However, it had made its debut during the Falklands War just a few years earlier in 1982. A single SAS soldier engaged in showdown an Argentinian attack aircraft, despite no formal training on the short-range missile. In fact, the only SAS soldier officially trained on the system, a soldier who was due to train other troops, died in a helicopter crash just 3 days before. But given how small and short the Falklands War was, and how minimally the Stinger was used, it can be understood why historians look to the Afghanistan-Soviet War as the system's first real major combat deployment. Though the CIA had resisted direct involvement with the conflict, lest America be dragged into another war, it was with Charlie Wilson's help that weapons and funding were delivered to the Mujahideen, using President Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq of Pakistan as a middleman. Needless to say, this boosted the Afghanistan strategy. Not to say there was a silver bullet solution by way of a single weapon or tactic, but given the Soviet strength in the air, it was as instrumental in the Cold War proxy engagement as all other cutting-edge strategies. One of the many results of the war was, of course, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which is a bold bragging right for the Stinger to pardon. In fact, the U.S. Air Defense Artillery Yearbook claims Mujahideen gunners used supplied Stingers to down around 269 aircraft across 340 engagements. That delivered a staggering 79% kill ratio, demonstrating the Stinger has as much potential as an offensive weapon as it does as a defensive technology. Moreover, the morale boost that came from the Stinger's implementation helped it stand out as a significant multiplier of lethal force during its first major deployment. However, a few months into its debut saw an evolution of counter-Stinger tactics, such as terrain-hugging tactics to prevent clear shots and nighttime raids. Still, it remains a strong asset for the front line, so a revamp of the Stinger missile would be a no-brainer, especially as Russia invades Ukraine's flat territories and city landscapes. No wonder Zelensky is asking for more in his campaign of resistance. Stinger in theory and practice. So how does this system work, and how has it stayed so simple in design yet effective in its outcome? At its heart, this system is an infrared seeker that relies on light and heat to track its locked target. But the real magic is under the hood. First off, for a sizable 1.52 meter length, that's roughly 5 feet, with the fins unfolded, and at a weight of 10.1 kilograms, 22 pounds, this slender piece of kit has an ingenious level of safety, security, and impact. To protect the operator, a throw-out motor propels the missile to a safe distance before launching itself by igniting a 2-stage solid fuel booster. This immediately reduces the propulsion knockback that you might expect from other manned rocket launchers or bazookas. Once lit, it accelerates up to a maximum speed of Mach 2.4 for a distance of 4,800 meters and a height of 3,800. That's a mighty envelope for a fairly lightweight device. But if the maths doesn't impress you, then the warhead will. With a 3-kilogram penetrating hit-to-kill tip, it uses an annular blast fragmentation, ABF, upon direct impact to detonate in a decidedly unpleasant fashion to end any hostile aircraft. Instead of a ball of shrapnel, it instead expels in a circle. This shreds its aircraft and personnel into segments. The end result is truly devastating. This leads to the next question: what are the fail-safes? Given its use on the front line, how does the tech compensate for human error during visualization or even capture? There are a few steps in place to mitigate the risk of error and in fact are similar in procedure to other shoulder-fired SAM systems. Once a visual has been acquired by the operator, a battery coolant unit, BCU, must be screwed into the gripstock. This supply of liquid argon and a thermal battery will lower the temperature of the missile, thus enabling it to sufficiently detect the IR signature of a hostile, whilst also powering it enough for target acquisition. Next, the operator manually tracks the craft through the sight. If the craft is unknown, then the mounted IFF antenna will interrogate the craft to determine whether it is friendly or hostile. If friendly, a response will be detected and lock the Stinger, preventing it from being fired, even by mistake. However, if no response is detected, then the missile will initiate tracking until a good track has been established. Once that happens, a tone will sound to alert the user that it's ready to fire the missile. In addition, vibrations will be sent to the user's jawbone to compensate for noise pollution on battlefields. The trigger is squeezed, the throw-out motor is deployed, and then the fins are stretched to guide flight until interception. They all work together to create a simple checklist for preparation, use, and destruction. However, there are some simple countermeasures that can be deployed by an aircraft to evade a Stinger missile. A common maneuver is to cut the engine, thus reducing the IR signatures, whilst also deploying clusters of flares to confuse the missiles. Even flying with the sun behind you can be an effective way to alter the path of a locked-on Stinger missile. And of course, the simplest way to avoid landing on the wrong side of a Stinger missile is to make sure you're not in its range. Because despite its age and size, this packs a mighty punch. And there you have it, the future history and instruction manual for the Stinger missile. Not just on the war's newest innovations, but one that is still in its infancy. During its time, variations have seen improvements to the sight and warhead, but time will tell whether the US's latest investment will yield a radically different missile system than previous iterations. Whether or not you're skeptical about the 36-month turnaround for the next gen, be sure to explain why in the comments. Give a thumbs up if you're a fan of military technology videos, and be sure to subscribe so that you can catch our next video. Thank you for watching.